I'm excited to introduce to you today Barry Smart, the IT Director of Hymans Robertson, and Matthew Adams from endjin.
Thank you very much. So when Barry and I first talked about this session, we were joking that it was going to be a bit of a late Halloween horror story because things are a bit scary in financial services at the moment. We're in a period of huge change and lots of disruption in the marketplace as well. Something I think established players in particular are feeling acutely. And we want to talk a little bit today about how Barry's organisation has faced up to these challenges and perhaps leading towards a happier and brighter future. So, scary. To my mind, there are a whole heap of changes that are to the business environment at the moment that are a bit scary and disruptive. Loads of forces acting on the industry. The reboot that's going on at the moment after the financial crisis, I think the shockwaves of that are still playing through the industry right now. I think regulatory point of view, regulators are changing banking and pensions legislation. Regulators are also taking on a different role and looking at things like behavioural economics in the light of the mis-selling scandal, changing the way they behave. There's also social and economic factors. For example, a huge percentage of people in the developing world don't have access to banking facilities, but are looking to access financial products, and that's a challenge the industry has to face up to. We've also got the information security issues. We're seeing ever greater in magnitude and frequency of data leakages or outages. I won't rehearse the most common recent ones. We're also seeing new entrants to the marketplace, led by the FinTech movement. And in Barry's industry, for example, the robo-advice is a big issue that people are trying to grapple with at the moment. And the development of the API economy, led by open banking APIs, foreign exchange, venture capital. But the mega vendors are also getting involved. The Apples and the Googles are putting their toe in the water with mobile payments, for example. But we know that's only the tip of the iceberg. And all of this is being fueled by this digital revolution that we're talking about in mobile, big data, machine learning, computation, new business models. And we're in something of a technology arms race as a result. So, Barry, you're IT Director of Hymans Robertson. That's a business that's about 100 years old, so I think we can put it into that category of established businesses. Do you recognise any of these as issues for you?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. The pensions industry is not immune to these forces. It's going through a period of significant upheaval at the moment. Let me pick out a few examples. At Hymans Robertson, the majority of our income has traditionally been associated with consulting around defined benefit or final salary pension schemes. And as you know, these schemes are now pretty much closed to new members, so we will see our core income start to decline with that running down of DB over the next 10 to 20 years. Pensions have not been immune from regulatory change, the most recent thing being the freedom of choice for people who, there's now infinite options available to people at the point that they retire. And this is creating a lot of tension in the industry, particularly with annuity providers, so they no longer have a captive market, and they're having to sort of think about strategies around how they can engage with people who are at the point of retirement to sort of sustain their own businesses. Add to this the fact that people are living longer, and many of them haven't saved enough for retirement. So they're simply having to work longer. So this is creating social issues for individuals, but also challenges for employers who are having to worry about the impact of an ageing workforce on their own business. And finally, through the consumerization of technology, our clients are simply expecting more from us and how we deliver our services. So they're demanding, online access to our modeling, financial modeling capability. They're demanding online interactive analytics to help them make some of the decisions they need to make in a more engaging way. So all of these factors have triggered the firm to make the biggest change that it's seen in its 94-year history. And we see actually all of this disruption as an opportunity that we want to grasp in order to create new lines of business that will sustain the firm for future generations.
So it's good that you see this disruption as an opportunity, clearly, but what's involved and how is that actually impacting on your firm?
Well, it's a pretty exciting time, that's for sure, and the impact's wide-reaching. Our objective is to diversify our business in order to support the end-to-end lifetime savings cycle, helping individuals to achieve better outcomes when they retire. So what we're talking about here is engaging with employees throughout their working life to plan and put enough money away so that they can retire comfortably, to engage with them in the approach to retirement, to help them make those important choices that are now available to them through freedom of choice, and also to support them throughout retirement, because there's key decisions they may need to make it through retirement depending on changing circumstances. And we want to support that end-to-end life cycle. In order to do this, we recognise that we need to shift from being purely a consulting business to being a consulting plus software product business. And we see these software products covering 3 domains. The first is the data economy. A good example is our Vita offering. It's the UK's largest and richest data bank of mortality data. And we offer that data set to clients to enable them to do much more sophisticated longevity risk management. So that's one area that we're looking at. The next is the API economy, where we offer up our sophisticated risk modelling tools to clients. We're working with one of the UK's largest insurance companies at the moment, giving them access to one of our financial models over the internet via a secure web service. So that's a model that we see we can exploit. And the final is the application economy, building full applications that we can offer to clients under a SaaS-style model. Another good example there is our guided outcomes platform, which is an award-winning platform that is used for DCE employee engagement. So there's a huge opportunity here for us to leverage all of the latest technologies. But I must say, Matthew, it hasn't been straightforward.
So when you say it hasn't been straightforward, do you mean it's been a big technology problem?
Well, we've had a few technology problems that we've needed to overcome, but actually the biggest challenge has been about bringing people along on the journey. I've been required to engage with a wide range of stakeholders, started with my own team, then my colleagues in legal, information security and compliance, of course the finance department wanted in on the act, the board, and even our clients have needed to sort of do the hard miles. So I've spent a lot of time with these stakeholders and others to get them on board with what we needed to do to grasp this opportunity.
Right. So as IT director, how did you go about bringing that very disparate group of people on board with you?
Well, when I joined the firm 3 years ago, one of the first things I had to do was put in place a refreshed IT strategy. So I used this as the catalyst really to engage with these stakeholders and build the consensus that I needed to move forward. For example, I've got a fantastic team, so I got them engaged early on in putting the first draft of the strategy together, and that really got buy-in from my own squad, if you like. And then I took that sort of draft strategy round key stakeholders in the business and put it to them, got their feedback. I was prepared to tune it to meet the wider needs of the business, but it also allowed me to get some of the key messages out there and get people thinking about it.
So, the strategy.
Yes.
What were the key elements of the strategy?
Well, the first key element was recognition, really, that technology, for the firm to succeed going forward, technology needed to become an enabler.
As we heard earlier on, avoid that IT director says no.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That was the sort of key part there.
But saying yes to everything sounds like quite a lot of work.
Yes, we were worried about that. So the next part of the strategy was around consolidation. We saw an opportunity to consolidate a lot of disparate best-of-breed technologies down onto sort of one vendor, and we chose Microsoft as our chosen vendor for that consolidation drive. And this created space within the team to then move on and start embracing some of the newer technologies. In particular, cloud was a technology that we felt we needed to grab onto. We'll maybe come onto that a wee bit later, why there was a driver there. And finally, we recognised that we couldn't do this alone. We had a great in-house IT team, but we wanted to bring in expertise from other companies that had been there and done some of this stuff. So we partnered with Microsoft. We chose them as our sort of core vendor, but also with their partners, Endjin and Softcat, to deliver this.
So how successful were you at getting the level of support you were looking for throughout the organisation for this strategy?
Pretty successful. I did all the hard miles. Eventually took a paper to the board that was approved, and that really gave me and the team a strong sense of empowerment to drive forward. But there was one part the board was slightly nervous about, and that was the cloud. I mean, they got the need for us to embrace the cloud, but they felt I needed to do a bit more work around the due diligence for cloud. And in particular around information security. We deal with a lot of personal data, pensions data, so they wanted to sort of have that level of assurance that it was a secure platform for us.
So what specifically did you do to overcome that uncertainty then? Because I think that's a common story.
Yeah, we again took a similar approach to developing the IT strategy, did some hard miles with the key stakeholders. I recognised earlier on that actuaries are I've got quite an analytical mindset, and I wanted to avoid a kind of emotive debate about, the pros and cons of cloud versus other options. So I actually had a sort of brainwave and took a technique that I'd used in a previous role at Scottish Power, which is used in that industry to analyse health and safety risk, and I applied that to cloud computing.
So what's that technique? How do you go about doing that?
It's a top secret technique called the Swiss cheese model, Matt. And
the what?
The Swiss cheese model. And we developed this in 3 stages. Its beauty is its simplicity. So the first thing we did was identify the undesired outcomes that we wanted to avoid effectively with respect to cloud computing. And we identified sort of 3 high-level undesired outcomes. The top one was information leakage. The next one was outages or some kind of poor performance of the cloud platform. And the final one was commercials. We wanted to make sure that, if we were going to adopt cloud commercially, it would be, good for us as a business. Then what we did was we worked backwards from that, and we identified the threats that could lead to one or more of these undesired outcomes happening. We identified overall 21 threats.
Only 21?
Only 21. So those ranged for external factors such as cyber crime, right through to internal factors such as poor coding, for example. And finally, we mapped out the barriers that we felt we needed to have in place between those threats on the left and the undesired outcomes on the right. Again, we worked through each of the threats and identified about 48 barriers that we believe were critical. And to help with our thinking, we grouped those up into physical barriers or technical barriers, process-related barriers, and people-related barriers. The principle behind Swiss cheese is that to prevent these threats becoming undesired outcomes, you need multiple barriers in place. And that when you do get a disaster, or in this case on cloud, a major information leakage or a major outage, when you analyse retrospectively what happened, the thing that's broken down, it's actually multiple barriers that have broken down. And when you illustrate those breakdown in barriers as holes in the barriers, you get this lovely Swiss cheese diagram. So we took this approach and we used it not just to look at the cloud, but we actually used a kind of test case of our own on-premise capability. So we were effectively comparing risks in the cloud, looking at all of this stuff, and then benchmarking it against our on-premise capability.
And I guess the cloud came out quite well from that comparison.
It did indeed.
So how much due diligence did you end up doing in the end?
We did about 3 months. It was quite a lengthy process, but we learned a lot during that process.
And was that all desk research, paperwork, or what?
No, we actually did a lot of talking and exploration, covered a lot of ground. Early on in this process, Microsoft were kind enough to invite us to tour their Azure Dublin's data centre in Dublin. And I didn't want it to be a sort of techie holiday, so I took along our head of legal and risk, our head of information security management, a couple of partners, and we went along and it was fantastic. Really, seeing was believing, and it helped to get us off to a great start, you know, and that tour really helped us to understand how strong, in particular, the physical and technical barriers are within the Azure platform. So that got us off to a good start. We also engaged with a panel law firm who had experience helping other clients get commercial cloud contracts into place, and we got some independent advice from Gartner as well.
So that does sound pretty comprehensive, but did it work?
It did. The Swiss cheese model was really useful. I used that to sort of talk each member of the board through what we wanted to do and why it was a good move for the firm. You know, it helped them to sort of visualize the risks, and also for them to understand that we'd done quite comprehensive and structured due diligence on this. Actually, when it came to presenting the contract to the board for approval, the comment from the chair of the board was, "This is a no-brainer. You know, we're all, Barry, you've done the hard miles. Let's just get this done and get on with it." So that was brilliant. So it felt like a kind of painful process going through this, but it was worth it. We had a clear cloud mandate. We'd done all the comms around the business. They were aware of what we were doing, so on we went. However, there was one part of the Swiss cheese model that we did identify that we felt we had a weakness or a bit of uncertainty around. And that was around how we were going to encrypt data in the cloud. So we set out a set of business scenarios. The concern really wasn't about how do you encrypt data. It was more about how do you manage the keys and secrets associated with that data. So you're transferring risk, so we were worried about losing the keys or not managing the keys properly. And we wanted to have clear segregation of duties around that and processes in place to manage all of that. So we worked with endjin to design a proof of concept to show how that could work in practice on Azure. And I'm pleased to say we found a really elegant solution using Key Vault, which is one of the newer technologies that has recently become available on the Azure platform.
So at the end of all of that, did you actually get to do any cloud adoption?
We did. We took quite a measured approach, and I think it's worth pointing out that whilst we were doing all the sort of cloud Azure due diligence, we were actually working away quite hard on our on-premise data centers. We recognised that as an established firm, to be successful, you know, we needed to push forward with a hybrid model, and that meant we had to, you know, modernise our own data centers. And they were long overdue, actually, an investment. So we basically renewed the storage, the compute, and the network, but we actually grasped onto that as an opportunity, working in this case with Softcat, another Microsoft partner, to virtualize our whole estate, and we achieved that. We got to 100% virtualization. And we used some of the clever technology in our storage solution from NetApp to improve our disaster recovery capability significantly, and we were able to drive down the costs of you know, backup and recovery across the board. So that was a great project in its own right, but it gave the team, you know, the bandwidth that we really needed to embrace the cloud. It also gave them exposure to some of the tools that actually came on to help us with adoption of the cloud, things like PowerShell. And they were able to experiment with things like templating and automation. Again, themes that you need to get your head around when you're embracing the cloud. So that was great work. When it came then to pushing on with the public cloud piece, you've already heard about the technical spike that we did with regard to encryption in the cloud. We did a similar technical spike, again with help from endjin, to explore how we could harness elastic compute on Azure. We have actuaries that come up with these wild and wacky financial models that are stochastic in nature. They consume huge amounts of compute power, and we were convinced that doing some of the maths on a spreadsheet, that we could do things faster and cheaper by harnessing the power of the public cloud. And under a hybrid model, that would give us the ability to sort of burst into the cloud when we had periods of high demand, and we wanted to prove that we could do this. So using Azure Batch, we proved that we could re-architect our models, deploy them into the cloud, and get them to run at high scale and deliver the kind of benefits that we were looking for. And that went really well. And then by pushing forward with private and public, we also started to get some spin-off benefits. So we're in the process of, we've got a couple of applications now wholly on Visual Studio Online, and I'd like to get all of our applications developed, built, tested in the cloud. So we're pushing on ahead with that. Some of the infrastructure work we've done meant that we could federate our identity management with Azure, and then that opened up opportunities to do two-factor authentication and self-service password resets. So again, that takes some of the load off the IT team because you can offer that directly to staff. And we're currently looking at Office 365. Now we've got the federation in place, we can maybe start to switch on some of the Office 365 offerings, video channels, something that we think we could get a real quick win with. We're creating more and more video as an organisation, and it's currently quite hard for us to distribute that, and that would be a brilliant step forward there. We're also interested in things like Yammer and OneDrive for business, things like that, switching all of that on.
So you're quite a long way down your cloud journey, and you've got a bunch of propositions that are actually active on the cloud now. What lessons do you think you've learned principally from this?
I think the biggest point is around technology being a team sport, and without getting everyone on board, all the stakeholders I talked about earlier on, you're always going to struggle to implement your strategy. Something will pop up at some point further down the line and derail things. So I think all of that time I spent, it felt like we were maybe going a bit slower than we hoped, but I think that was time well invested, and I think it's allowed us to push ahead quite a bit faster than we would have done if we hadn't done that. And now that we've got a clearly communicated vision, we've been able to push on ahead with the app API and data economy type propositions I talked about earlier. I think, however, there's a wee bit of a lessons learned around that, because now we've got all this fantastic technology. It's kind of unlocked the entrepreneurial spirit within the firm. We've got loads of good ideas about things we could build and take to market, and I think if we'd seen that coming, we could have been a bit more proactive about putting some more disciplined product development governance in place. And we're currently, addressing that at the moment.
So, as IT director, are you just kicking back and watching the money roll in? Is the job done?
Well, we're well on our way. However, there is a big but.
A big but. So you haven't had this happy ending we talked about earlier on?
Well, it's not so much that there hasn't been a happy ending. It's more that we're realising that there will be no ending. For the reason that you described right at the start. We're in a new era. All the disruption you talked about means that the kind of once in a generation transformational change is a thing of the past, and we're moving now into an environment where it's all about continuous change. So as a business, we're thinking about how we need to evolve to adapt to this new way of working.
So what kind of changes are you thinking of implementing then?
The model we're looking at impacts all areas of the firm. It's not a technology problem. I mean, technology's got an increasing role to play, and we're definitely recognising that within the organisation. To be successful, technology needs to work with hand in hand with other facets of the business to successfully take new products and propositions to market. So that's one key thing that we've recognised. The second thing is really about how we can increase the cadence of our governance to make the business become more agile. And this agility is enabled through leading indicators that need to permeate up through the organisation, allowing informed decisions to be made at all levels. And the final thing is really about competencies. We recognise we need to develop new competencies as an organisation. Just going back to the product management discipline I talked about earlier, that's one area that we've recognised we need to develop competencies in. And this is particularly important. We have been a consulting firm up until now. That's a different mindset to being a sort of product-orientated organisation, so that competency's key for us going forward. I don't know, Matt, maybe you've seen other clients that you deal with going through similar journeys?
That's certainly true. I think a lot of our clients come to us with technology questions that are actually product governance questions in disguise, and how you balance your rate of innovation with your total cost of ownership and your investment, and how you manage that without busting the business along the way. I think that'd chime with you, certainly.
It does, yeah.
Yes. Well, that's about it. That's all we've got time for. I hope that's been a useful insight into the journey that Barry's been on, and at least some of that chimes with you and your experience. I think that it's clear how cloud has had a pivotal role in the change in your business, but not as an end in itself, but as an enabler for the kinds of organisational change and business change that you're trying to enact, and how IT plays a role in that, so that you've got a good chance of thriving for another 100 years in the financial services sector.
Exactly.
I would hope.